So good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first in our English language series, Why English? This series was developed with the aim of providing to the English language community in Hungary information and practical tips. Please come and grab a seat. That families with young children, parents, will find useful and informative. My topic today is the power of the bilingual brain. We have some great speakers following me, and before I speak about this topic, I just wanted to welcome them and to thank them for joining us and volunteering to talk. Robert Goris from Australia will be speaking next, talking about bully-proof and a little bit about his work in Budapest and soon in Kenya, Africa. Paul Duchamp from the American International School, Budapest Middle School principal, will be speaking thereafter, talking about third culture, cross-culture kids. This is a fascinating topic that I think a lot of expatriates will be keenly following. And the SOS Children's Village, represented by Lena Silvasi. Lena has a very colourful background, and she's going to share some of the work and some of the goals and achievements of the SOS Children's Village in Hungary. The program today will feature content that I hope you'll find informative and interesting. If there are any questions, could you please ask them at the end of each speaker's talk? Thank you very much. So, the bilingual brain. Well, maybe we should start off and let's ask a basic question. What is the brain, and how does our brain look like, and how does it work? Now, these are fairly simple questions, but are very, very difficult to answer. If I can just show you Exhibit A, and perhaps you might like to just pass this around and have a look at it. It just gives you, I think, a tangible image of how the brain looks like. When I was looking for a model of the brain, I called Ken Baines at the Britannic International School and I said, "Ken, I need a brain." And there was silence. And he said, "Peter, beg your pardon?" I said, "Ken, I need a model brain. I have a presentation on Sunday and we need to talk about the brain." He said, "Well, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you on that one." So he calls me back the next day. He says, "Well, Peter, I can't give you a full brain, but I can give you half a brain." So on that basis, I collected the model, and I hope you find it interesting. I'd just like to show you a very short slide, which is actually prepared by an Australian group, which just says a few words about the brain and how it's formed.
The brain is the most fascinating part of the human body. Not much to look at. It resembles a spongy mass of tissue. It feels like tofu. It weighs roughly 4 tubs of butter. Our brain is actually made up of mostly water and about 10% fat. While our brain only makes up approximately 2% of the entire body's weight, it uses a massive 20% of the body's energy. The brain's basic building blocks are known as neurons, and we have around 100 billion of these, each with between 1,000 to 10,000 connections to other neurons, creating neural pathways or roads within the brain. There are literally trillions of neural connections within the brain. Similar to a city's electrical power grid, information is passed along these roads through a series of chemical messages and electrical impulses. As all of this activity takes place, our brain generates between 10 to 25 watts of power, enough to power a light bulb. Over the course of one day, your brain generates more electrical impulses from firing neurons than all of the telephones in the world. So really, your brain isn't just a spongy mass of tissue. It's your most complex organ, a power station that connects your every thought, movement, and feeling. And it's firing right now.
Yeah, so it's some incredible statistics that the weight of an average human brain is about 1.3, 1.4 kilograms. And the complexity of the brain with 100 billion neurons and then each neuron having thousands of interconnections. It's quite an extraordinary piece of engineering. The bilingual brain is a fascinating topic, and research shows that the bilingual brains are better at switching between mental tasks. Additional languages can open many doors, creating exciting new opportunities for developing relationships, both social and in business. And did you know that bilingual countries are more common than single language countries? It's an interesting fact. Over 50% of the worldwide population is bilingual, with a large portion of that speaking English plus their native language. And official bilingualism refers to the national policy adopted by countries who recognise two languages as official, handling all correspondence and official dealings in those two languages. And I'm sure some of you will know countries where bilingualism is very, very common. Canada, Switzerland, where many children learn 3, sometimes even 4 languages at the same time. Most African countries, Belgium, Puerto Rico, and the bilingual brain was first talked about by Maria Montessori. She was a very, very famous Italian physician, psychologist, who in the 1900s developed and researched early childhood, brain development, how children were educated, and she developed many practical and methodological systems that today are used worldwide. There are thousands of Montessori schools worldwide. So for those of you interested in Maria Montessori, I commend you to look up her work. She wrote a fascinating book called The Absorbent Mind, which is well worth reading. It's the language is a little dated, but the content is still very, very relevant. And she wrote that the period of infancy is undoubtedly the richest. It should be utilized by education in every possible and conceivable way. The waste of this period of life can never be compensated. Instead of ignoring the early years, it is our duty to cultivate them with the utmost care. The child has a mind able to absorb knowledge and has the power to teach himself. Montessori believed very much in creating materials and systems where the child was able to develop and learn and teach themselves with minimal interaction from a teacher. Quite a revolutionary concept. The child grows up speaking his parents' tongue, yet to grown-ups the learning of a language is a very great intellectual achievement. No one teaches the child, yet he comes to use nouns, verbs and adjectives to perfection. And finally, she wrote that the most important period of a child's life is not the age of university studies, but the first one, the period from birth to the age of 6. I'd like to show you a brief interview which was produced in the United States, talking about bilingualism, and this was recorded last year.
All this week, SMBC will focus on education leading up to our 2-hour special on Sunday called Making the Grade. And as we explore how our kids can start early and aim high, we're learning language could be a key in all of this. In fact, being bilingual is like feeding superfood to the brain. This is according to a new article in the latest issue of Newsweek. The author of that article, Casey Schwartz, joins us in the studio now to talk more about this. Casey, good morning.
Good morning, Thomas.
All right, so this is really exciting because in this article you talk about bilingualism being a superfood for our kids' brains. Explain how the research supports that.
Well, it turns out that being able to speak more than one language at a really high level and on a regular basis is like constantly flexing a muscle in your brain, and it carries over into all kinds of skills beyond those of actually speaking a language.
This is fantastic, and I wish I was a little better at a second language, but this is something that has grown in the U.S. over the past decade. Take a look at this. According to the U.S. Census, in 1980, only 11% of Americans lived in homes where languages other than English were spoken. By 2007, that nearly doubled to 20%. So explain, are there any particular languages that are recommended or stronger suited for the American culture to learn as a second language?
Well, and right now there are about 440 bilingual schools in the U.S., and the most popular language being offered in those schools is Spanish. And surprisingly, Mandarin is a close second, with French a distant third.
So French, the Romance language, is falling behind Mandarin, which would be the business language.
Yes, it would.
When we talk about the success rate of kids actually retaining all of this, is there any research that supports how well kids are retaining? Because you're saying that it really needs to be something that you flex constantly so that you're using it as almost you were your first language.
Absolutely. I mean, the absolute rule of thumb is, practice, practice, practice. With disuse, languages tend to sort of fade from mind.
What's since this is a growing trend, what is the sustainability of schools being able to continue this? As you mentioned, there are 440 elementary schools that are teaching right now these multilingual educational courses.
And by that, I do mean total immersion, multilingual, bilingual curriculum where the class is taught completely in a foreign language.
So can that trend be sustained as we move forward? Do you think that it will grow in popularity, especially if the research is there to support it?
I hope so. I think the larger question is, can it afford it not to?
That's a great question. Can it afford not to? I told you I'm going to Spain, and all I know is El Baño and Cerveza. And I will study on the plane on the way over there. Casey, thanks so much. Great to see you this morning. Casey Schwartz. And be sure to join Emmett.
Yeah, that was an interesting interview recently on CNBC. And it's just sort of highlights the focus, especially in the US, but many other countries, about the importance of language development in early childhood from birth, from nursery age. So the younger, the better. The more open the brain, the faster they can adapt and learn a second or additional language. And I think this trend has probably sped up over the last 10, 20 years with the growth of international air travel, being able to move from one continent to another in a matter of hours, with the development of the internet, with international trade and commerce being in English, and not just English, but other languages, and the importance of the Chinese economy now, and of course reflected in the learning of the Chinese language as a second or additional language worldwide, is also becoming more and more prominent. I think that most parents are concerned that, speaking to their child in different languages may confuse them and result in a delay in language development. This was an old theory, an old belief that the research shows is just not the case. It's a myth. Studies have found that bilingualism does not cause any delay in children's language development. In fact, exposing them to many languages is beneficial for their learning, not just learning the language, but in learning overall in later years. With the research suggesting that children will benefit with increased creativity, better able to communicate with others, better at solving complex problems, and advantages in thinking skills. I'd just like to show you another brief video which I think will highlight this topic.
The ability to use language is one of the things that makes us human. Language is the backbone of human society. It allows us to share the joy and pain of everyday life and to share knowledge and culture across generations. While other species cannot learn human language even with years of intensive training, all humans, with the proper input, are able to acquire and use language with little effort. Children pick up language at an amazing rate. By the time they are 2 years old, most children already know many words, and some know as many as 500. By the time they are 4 years old, most children are able to understand and use language in much the same way adults do. Of course, a child isn't just born with a language ready to go. As with the other brain systems we've talked about, a child's early experience builds the areas of the brain that support good language skills. For most people, the brain areas most involved in language processing are the frontal and temporal areas of the left hemisphere. This is true whether a language is spoken or whether it's a signed language, like American Sign Language. Signed languages like ASL use the same brain systems and show similar patterns of development as spoken languages. The role of experience in shaping the brain systems important for language starts very early.
There's a few more minutes of that, but I just wanted to show you the introduction. It just reaffirmed what we've been discussing. And getting back to the United States experience, and perhaps Paul could confirm this, the United States typically up till the last 30, 40 years were not very keen or not very involved with learning or teaching second or additional languages. That's becoming now more and more accelerated over the last 10, 20 years. In the state of Utah, there was a governor and later ambassador to China by the name of John Huntsman. And he was a rare political figure in America in that he spoke fluent Mandarin Chinese. He argued that multilingualism in education would be increasingly essential to the 21st century for students, business people, and government officials. Today, all over Utah, elementary school students are learning and studying in 2 languages. It's called total immersion, and it means that 50% of their day is in English and 50% is in a second language. Now, the languages of choice at this moment are Spanish and Chinese. And that means that the child, for example, doing English-Chinese will have only Chinese language in the afternoons, and he will not be speaking any English. All of the subjects, the programs are run in the Chinese language. And this program kicked off in the 2009 school year, so it's only been running for 4 years. And the program started with 1,400 students in 25 schools. And by this fall, so in other words by today, this has increased to approximately 20,000 children in 100 schools in the state of Utah. And the concept of total immersion seems to be working very well. Parents, other educators from other parts of the US have encouraged and are keen to also adopt this total immersion program. And I think it just reinforces the importance of bilingualism.